What are you looking at, boy?
Boy Deputy Wade Tolliver yelled, the screen door slamming behind him as he marched straight to the corner booth. He didn't ask for identification. He didn't state a crime. He just snatched Isaiah's plate and flipped it onto the floor.
You don't belong here.
Grease and ceramic shattering across the diner.
You think because you wear a nice suit, it hides that black skin? Your kind doesn't belong here.
Isaiah Rutledge didn't move. He kept his palms flat on the laminate, his face a mask of absolute, frozen calm. Between the sugar caddy and the ketchup sat a folded, yellowed piece of paper. The 1971 citation his late father had carried for 50 years as a silent scar of this county's hatred. Tolliver leaned down, slamming both palms onto the table.
You want to preach the Fourth Amendment to me? In Merrill County, I am the law.
With a slow, deliberate smirk, the deputy grabbed Isaiah's full cup and poured the boiling black coffee directly over his hands and onto the table. The brown liquid flooded the surface, drowning the paper and dissolving his father's name into a ruined smear.
I don't need a reason, boy.
Tolliver hissed, grabbing Isaiah by the hair and dragging him face first onto the gravel outside. He had no idea he just put handcuffs on the United States attorney, and he was about to get 11 years to think about it. This is Black Stories, where the arrogant believe their titles make them untouchable, only to discover that dignity always keeps the receipts. What happens when a corrupt system picks a fight with the one man who owns the power to tear it down? Let's begin. It took 9 minutes. 9 minutes from the moment that screen door slapped shut behind Wade Tolliver to the moment a 51-year-old man was face down in the gravel of a diner parking lot on Route 9 with 2 second-degree burns rising across the backs of his hands like a map of a country nobody wanted to visit. 9 minutes. And in order to understand why those 9 minutes ended with a sheriff in a federal prison, a district attorney disbarred, and an entire county placed under the supervision of the United States Department of Justice, you have to go back 3 days. Because this story does not start with a deputy. It starts with a coat. Isaiah Grant Rutledge buried his father on a Wednesday. It rained the way it always rains in Merrill County, Mississippi, in October. Not hard, not honest, just a slow gray sweat that beads on the shoulders of a suit and never quite commits to falling. 41 people stood at the graveside. Isaiah counted them, because he counted things when he did not want to feel things. 41 people. 7 umbrellas. 1 folding chair with a card taped to the back that read family, which he did not sit in. The pastor said that Ezra Rutledge had been a deacon, a millwright, a husband to Odessa for 39 years, and a man who was never once in his life late. The pastor did not say that Ezra Rutledge had been arrested twice in Merrill County for things that were not crimes. Nobody says that part at a funeral. Afterward, at the funeral home, a woman handed Isaiah a paper grocery bag with his father's clothes inside. The coat was on top, brown wool. The coat Ezra had worn to church since the Clinton administration, with elbows worn shiny as river stones. And Isaiah put his hand into the pocket the way you do, without thinking, the way you check a coat before you give it away. That is where he found the paper, folded 4 times, soft as cloth from 50 years of a man's thumb finding it and putting it back. The ink had gone the color of weak tea, but you could still read every word. State of Mississippi, Merrill County, citation number 4471, issued to Rutledge. Ezra J. Date. The 3rd of November, 1971. Offense impeding traffic. Fine, $25. Officer, a signature worn down to a scar. Isaiah stood in the back room of a funeral home, with fluorescent lights buzzing over his head. And he did the arithmetic that he had spent his entire adult life refusing to do. The 3rd of November, 1971. His father had told the story exactly once. At a kitchen table, In 1986, when Isaiah was 11 years old and had asked why they didn't have a photograph of Granddaddy, and Ezra had set down his fork and said, "I went down to the courthouse to put my name on a piece of paper. Man told me I was standing in the road. Road was empty. So, wasn't a car on it for a mile." And then Ezra Rutledge had folded that citation and put it back in his coat pocket. And he had never taken it out again. And he had never mentioned it for the rest of his life. Isaiah Rutledge was 51 years old. 11 days earlier, he had raised his right hand in a marble room in Washington and been confirmed by the United States Senate by a vote of 68 to 31 as the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Mississippi, Chief Federal Prosecutor, 37 counties, including this one, including the courthouse 9 miles from where he was standing. He put his father's ticket into the breast pocket of his own suit and told himself he would frame it when he got home. He did not know it was going to be Exhibit 14. He was supposed to be back in Oxford by Sunday. There was a swearing in. There was a district to run. 8 assistant United States attorneys. A public corruption docket he had inherited half-built, and a desk with a nameplate that still carried the name of the man before him. But there was also a house. 2 bedrooms on Cleaver Street, with a porch that leaned, and a water heater from 1988 and 30 years of a man's life packed into a hall closet. And somebody had to sort it. He had a sister, Rochelle, in Jackson, working doubles at the hospital. He had a brother buried in the same cemetery as his father, so it was him. And the boy, Devin Rutledge, was 19 years old, 6'1", and built like a question mark, all shoulders, and no idea yet what to do with them. Rochelle Son, a sophomore at Tougaloo, studying pre-law, carrying a 3.8 grade point average that he mentioned exactly as often as he thought he could get away with. He had driven up on Thursday to help his uncle carry boxes. And he had spent 4 days doing the thing that 19-year-old boys do when they are near a man they want to become. He talked too much, and he watched everything. So when they call you sir now, Devin said on Saturday morning, standing in the doorway of the emptied bedroom, "Is it like real, sir? Or is it like teacher, sir? It's like your honor is standing behind me," Isaiah said. "And he outranks both of us." "That's not an answer." "Correct. Get your shoes." "Where?" "Breakfast," Isaiah said. "You've eaten nothing but toaster pastries for 4 days. And your mother will find out. And I will be the one who has to explain it." Devon grint. Ruthie's. And Isaiah stopped, with one hand flat on a cardboard box, and something went very quiet in his chest. "Ruthie's," he said. They took Isaiah's rental car, a gray sedan, out of the Memphis airport, 41,000 miles on the odometer, with a pine tree air freshener that somebody else had chosen. His government vehicle was in Oxford, in a garage, with a leather credential case sitting in the glove box, a leather case with a gold star on it. His protective detail, at that exact moment, was parked at a gas station 6 miles south on Route 9, drinking bad coffee and quietly cursing his name, because Isaiah Rutledge had asked them, and asked was the polite version of the word he was legally entitled to use, to stay off him while he buried his father. "Give me the county," he had said to Chief Deputy Vivian Okafor on Tuesday night. "Just the county. 3 days. Nobody in Merrow County knows who I am. Nobody in Merrow County cares." And Okafor had looked at him for a long moment, the way a woman looks at a man who has just informed her that he does not need the parachute. 11 days ago, she said, "You put 4 men from the Ridgeline cell in front of a federal grand jury. 2 of them are still out there. They're in Idaho. They have cars in Idaho. Sir, they compromised. 6 miles of distance. A radio check every 90 minutes. Location sharing on his phone, which he was not to switch off, not to leave in the vehicle. and not to hand to anybody. Isaiah agreed to all 3 conditions. He would break every one of them before 10 o'clock that morning, and not a single one of them by choice. Ruthie's wayside sat on the northbound shoulder of Route 9, like something that had grown there, rather than something that had been built. Cinderblock. Painted white. So many times the corners had gone soft and round. A hand-lettered sign. 9 tables. A counter with 11 stools, and a screen door with a spring that had been announcing customers since the first Bush administration. Isaiah had not walked through that door in 34 years. He had washed dishes in that kitchen, the summer he was 16. For $2.10 an hour, and all the biscuits he could carry home in a napkin. Ruth Ann Purnell had been 40 years old then, and she had stood at that same counter, wiping that same laminate, and she had told him, "Boy, you got a mouth on you and a brain behind it. Get them both out of Merrow County." He had. The bell over the door rang at 8:52 in the morning. On Saturday, the 11th of October, Ruth Ann Purnell looked up from the register. 71 years old. Hairnet. White apron. Forearms like a woman who has lifted 10,000 crates of eggs. She looked at the tall man in the doorway, at the gray coming in hard at his temples, at the reading glasses pushed up on his head, and her face did the thing that a face does maybe 4 or 5 times in an entire life. "Ezra's boy," she said. "Yes, Mom, Isaiah Rutledge." She came around the counter. She did not hug him. She took hold of both of his hands and turned them over and looked at the palms, as if she were checking that they had stayed soft. "I heard," she said. "I was at the church. You didn't see me. I didn't see anybody." "Miss Ruthie, no." She squeezed once and let go. Her eyes went past him to Devon and narrowed with pleasure. "And who is this?" "Rochelle's. Lord." She put her hand flat on Devon's cheek. "And Devon Rutledge. 19 years old and 6'1", and made almost entirely of shoulders. Went completely still and let her. "You've got her forehead," she said. "Sit down. Both of you. Corner booth. Don't you argue with me." They sat in the corner booth. There were, at that moment, 14 people inside Ruthie's wayside. A retired mail carrier named Alvin Meeks, 78. At the counter, 2 brothers who ran a lawn service, sunburned, eating in silence. A young mother with a toddler in a high chair. 3 men off the second shift at the poultry plant, eating dinner at 9 in the morning. A trucker, Ruthie's nephew Darnell on the grill, and a white couple in their 60s. Tourists, lost on their way to Tupelo, studying a paper road map with the concentration of the doomed. 14 people. Every single one of them would eventually be deposed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Ruthie brought coffee without being asked. Isaiah put his hand over the top of the cup and said, "Just water, ma'am." And she ignored him completely and poured it anyway. And he laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in 6 days. "You still take it black," she said. "I still take it black. Some things a county can't beat out of you," she said, and set the pot down. "Grits. Eggs over medium for you. Boy gets everything." She pointed at Devon without looking at him. "Everything. Yes, Mom," said Devon. Delighted, Isaiah reached into his jacket for his phone to check the time, and his fingers brushed something else. The paper. He had not meant to bring it. He had meant to leave it in the box with the coat. But there it was, folded 4 times, soft as cloth, in the breast pocket of the same suit he had worn to his confirmation hearing. And when he pulled his hand out, he pulled the paper out with it, and it came to rest on the table between the sugar caddy and the ketchup, like a thing that had been waiting a very long time to arrive. Devon leaned across, What's that? Your great-granddaddy's. His what? Isaiah unfolded it. 4 folds. 50 years. It opened like a moth, impeding traffic. Devon, read it. Then read it again. Isaiah watched the boy's mouth move. Watched him run the arithmetic that everyone in that family eventually ran. And watched the exact moment it landed. The way his jaw shifted. The way his eyes came up off the paper. 1971. Devon said, November. That's the voter registration drive. That's the voter registration drive. Devon sat back hard against the vinyl and said a word his mother would not have approved of. And Isaiah Rutledge, the chief federal prosecutor for 4 counties, a man who had sent a sitting county supervisor to a federal penitentiary, folded the paper back along its 50-year-old creases and spoke the truest sentence of his life. He never fought it. Isaiah said. He paid the $25. He put it in his pocket. And he never said another word about it for 50 years. Why? Isaiah looked out the window at Route 9. Empty. The same as 1971. Not a car on it for a mile. Because in 1971, he said, there was nowhere to say it to. The bell over the screen door rang. It was 9:04 in the morning. Deputy Wade Tolliver came in first. Because Deputy Wade Tolliver always came in first. 19 years on the job, 47 years old. A big man gone thick through the middle. With the specific, unhurried walk of a man who has never once in his professional life been asked to explain himself. He did not hold the door. Haletitslop. Behind him came Deputy Cody Mink. 26 years old. 14 months on the job. Still shaving too close. Still with that hopeful shine on the toes of his boots. Mink did not hold the door either. Because Mink was learning. And he was learning from Tolliver, and the diner did what diners in Merrow County had been doing for 60 years. It went quiet. Not silent. Quiet. Alvin Meeks turned back to his eggs. The lawn service brothers found something interesting in their laps. The young mother reached over and laid her hand flat on her toddler's chest. An old reflex. Older than she was. And Ruth Ann Purnell walked behind her register. And stood there. And did not smile. Tolliver crossed the room the way a man crosses a room he believes he owns. Past the counter. Past the poultry workers. He slowed beside their table. Slowed, but did not stop. And said, y'all off shift. Or y'all off work. And he made a sound like a laugh. And kept walking. And not one of those 3 men lifted his head. Then he saw the corner booth. He saw the suit. He saw the 2 black faces at the good table by the window. The one with the light on it. The one that in 1964 in this county nobody who looked like Isaiah Rutledge would have been permitted to sit at. And something in Wade Tolliver's chest went warm. Here is the part that has to be understood. Because in the end, the entire case turned on it. Wade Tolliver was not angry. He was not frightened. His pulse, measured by the fitness tracker on his own wrist, and later subpoenaed by the government of the United States, was 72 beats a minute. Resting. He was comfortable. What are you looking at? Boy. The screen door was still swinging. He marched straight to the corner booth. He did not ask for identification. He did not state a crime. He reached down and snatched the plate out from under Isaiah's hands and flipped it onto the floor. And grease and ceramic went across the linoleum. And the toddler in the high chair began to scream. You think because you wear a nice suit? Tolliver said. It hides that black skin. Your kind doesn't belong here. Devon's chair scraped. Devon. Isaiah did not raise his voice. He did not turn his head. He said his nephew's name the way a man lays a hand on a horse. Sit down. Hands on the table. Palms flat. Devon sat down. He put his hands on the table. Smart boy, said Mink from behind Tolliver. And grinned. And then glanced at Tolliver to see whether the grin had been correct. Isaiah Rutledge folded his napkin. He set it beside the empty space where his plate had been. He kept both palms flat and visible on the laminate. And he looked up into the face of Deputy Wade Tolliver with an expression that a federal jury would later be shown a photograph of, taken from a phone at the counter, and would sit and stare at in silence for a very long time. It was not fear. It was not rage. It was a man reading a document. "Deputy," Isaiah said quietly, "I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to know that I am asking it politely, and I would like an answer. Am I being detained?" Tolliver's jaw worked. "Excuse me, am I being detained?" "It's a simple question. Under Mississippi law, and under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, you may stop and question me only if you have reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed a crime, am committing a crime, or am about to commit one. If you have that suspicion, tell me what it is. If you don't have it, then I am free to go. And I would like to finish my breakfast, which is on your floor." The screen door spring creaked in the silence. Somewhere behind the counter, a friar ticked. 19 months later, in a federal courtroom in Oxford, Mississippi, a defense attorney named Dwayne Hollifield would stand in front of 12 jurors and describe that exact moment as, and this is a direct quotation from the trial transcript, "An educated man deliberately provoking a working police officer, and Special Attorney Marguerite Delacroix would rise from the government's table and say, 'Your Honor, the government objects. Counsel has just described a citizen asking a police officer to obey the law as a provocation. I would ask the court to note that the defense has now made the government's entire case in a single sentence. The judge sustained it, but that was 19 months later, in the corner booth of Ruthie's Wayside. At 9:05 in the morning, Wade Tolliver leaned down and slammed both palms onto the tabletop hard enough that the sugar caddy jumped. "You want to preach the Fourth Amendment to me?" He put his face 6 inches from the face of the chief federal law enforcement officer of the Northern District of Mississippi, and he said the sentence that would be read aloud twice on the floor of the United States Senate in Merrow County. "I am the law." And then he smiled. That was the thing Devin Rutledge could never afterward explain. Not to his mother, not to the FBI, not to the grand jury. He kept circling back to it, over and over. He smiled. Sir. He liked it. He had been waiting all morning for somebody to give him a good day. Isaiah did not blink. "Deputy Tolliver," he said, reading the name off the brass bar above the man's pocket and pronouncing it very carefully, the way a prosecutor pronounces a name he fully intends to say again. "Badge 419. I want to be clear so there is no confusion later. I have committed no offense. I am unarmed. My nephew is 19 years old and unarmed. We are eating breakfast. I am asking you, on the record, in front of these witnesses, to state the crime. I don't need a reason." "Boy." And Wade Tolliver reached down, and he picked up Isaiah Rutledge's coffee. The cup had been poured 4 minutes earlier from a commercial brewer that Ruth Ann Purnell kept at 185 degrees, because that is how the men who came off the poultry line at 7 in the morning liked it, and because in 31 years nobody had ever had cause to measure it. 2 federal investigators measured it. Twice. It went into the record. He did not throw it. That matters. He did not hurl it in some hot flash of rage that a lawyer could later dress up as a heat of the moment. He held it, and he turned it slowly, from about 8 inches above the table, and he poured 185-degree black coffee across the backs of both of Isaiah Rutledge's hands, which were flat on the laminate, which were exactly where a police officer had told him to keep them. The sound the man made was not a scream. Every witness agrees. He made a sound like a door, closing somewhere far off in a house nobody lives in. The coffee flooded the table. It ran under the sugar caddy. It found a folded piece of paper, the color of weak tea, and it drank into the 50-year-old creases. And Ezra Rutledge's name, written in a deputy's hand in 1971, went dark and soft and began to come apart. Isaiah Rutledge did not look at his hands. He looked at the paper. He watched the brown bloom cross his father's name. And in that instant, a man who had cross-examined killers without ever once raising his voice, a man who 11 days earlier had sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, wanted, more than he had ever wanted anything, to put his hands around Wade Tolliver's throat. He kept them on the table. "Devin," he said. His voice came out steady, and it cost him something that he never told anyone about. "Phone." Devin's hands were shaking so hard he dropped it twice. But he got it up. And in the first frame of the video that would eventually be played to a federal jury, broadcast on the evening news to 41 million people, and entered into the congressional record of the United States, the first thing you see is a man's hands, flat on a flooded table, already blistering, absolutely still. The second thing you hear is his voice. "My name is Isaiah Rutledge. It is 9:07 in the morning on Saturday, the 11th of October. I am at Ruthie's Wayside on Route 9 in Merrill County, Mississippi. Deputy Wade Tolliver, badge 419, has assaulted me. I have not been told what crime I am suspected of. Deputy, I am asking you one final time. On the record, what is the crime?" And Wade Tolliver looked directly into a 19-year-old boy's phone camera and gave the government of the United States its case. "I don't need a reason." "Boy," Cody Mink came around the table fast. "Because he was young, and because he was showing off." And he twisted the phone out of Devin's hand, and it hit the table and slid and went into the coffee. Devin came up out of the booth. "Devin." "No." Isaiah's voice cracked across that diner like a rifle shot. It is the only time in the entire 9 minutes that he used volume, and he did not use it on the police. He used it on his nephew. And Devin Rutledge froze half out of his seat with his hands open at his sides. And in that frozen second, his uncle spoke to him low and fast and absolutely level. "Hands open. Don't touch anything. Don't touch anybody. Look at me. Look at me. Son, you are 19 years old, and you are black in Merrill County. Do not give them a reason." Devin looked at his uncle. He sat back down. He put his open hands into the spilled coffee on the table. He was crying, and he did not know it. And behind the counter, Olivin Meeks, 78 years old, who had walked the same mail route for 31 years, lifted up a phone his granddaughter had given him for Christmas with a hand that shook so badly the footage was almost useless. Almost, because you can see it. Down in the corner of the frame, you can see Ruth Ann Purnell come out from behind her register, wiping her hands slowly on her apron, and start walking toward 2 armed deputies with no hurry in her at all. The way a woman walks toward a stove. "Wade Tolliver," she said. "Get out of my restaurant." Tolliver did not even turn around. "Ruthie," he said, "sit down before I shut you down." Then he reached across the table, and he took a fistful of Isaiah Rutledge's hair, and he dragged him out of the booth and across the linoleum through the broken plate and the grease, and out through the screen door, face first, down the 3 concrete steps, and into the gravel. It was 9:08 in the morning. He had 1 minute left. Here is what 4 separate videos show, from 4 angles. In the gravel, lot of Ruthie's Wayside, between 9:08 and 9:16 in the morning, a 51-year-old man on his hands and knees in the dirt, blood coming from a split above his eyebrow where the bottom step took him. He does not get up quickly. He gets up the way a man gets up who understands that every motion he makes is being recorded, and that the recording will be watched by strangers who will decide, later, whether he was the kind of black man who deserved it. He rises slowly. He puts his palms out where they can be seen. The skin across the backs of both hands has gone white and glassy and is beginning to lift combined. Hands on the car, Tolliver said. Isaiah put his hands on the car. He spread his feet before he was told. Because he had prepared 400 witnesses in his career, and he knew precisely how this would look from the outside. And because he had been taught it at 9 years old, at a kitchen table on Cleaver Street, by a millwright, with a folded piece of paper in his coat pocket, Tolliver searched him. Not a pat down. A search. He went into the jacket, into the trouser pockets. He took the wallet. He took the keys. He took the phone. The one with location sharing switched on. The one that Chief Deputy Vivian Okafor had made him promise never to hand to anybody. And he dropped it on the hood of the cruiser and slid it away with the back of his hand. The screen lit up as it went. A notification. Okafor. V. 9:10 in the morning. Check in. Nobody read it. You got a badge on you, Tolliver said. Going through the wallet. Man says articulable. Usually he's got a badge. I would like my wallet back. You'd like a lot of things. He pulled out the cards one at a time and let them drop into the dirt. A credit card. An insurance card. A parent weekend pass from Tougaloo College. A Mississippi driver's license. He did not find a federal credential because there was not one to find. It was 130 miles north. In a glove box. In Oxford. Because Isaiah Rutledge had come home to bury his father and had not wanted for 3 days. To be anybody but Ezra's boy. Rutledge. Tolliver read off the license. He said it out loud twice. Rutledge. You? Any relation to the Rutledges over on Cleaver? Ezra Rutledge was my father. And Wade Tolliver laughed. He turned to Mink, and he said something that is on Alvin Meeks's video. Through the window glass. And the audio is bad. But the enhancement the Bureau ran on it was clean enough to play in open court. His daddy used to run a shift at the mill. Tolliver said. Old man had a mouth on him too. And Cody Mink. 26 years old. 14 months into a career. Said. Runs in them. They searched the car. No warrant. No consent. No probable cause. Tolliver opened the driver's door. Popped the trunk. Threw the rental agreement into the gravel. Pulled up the floor mats. Mink took the back seat. They found a garment bag with a black suit inside. A box of photographs. A Bible with a rubber band around it. And a paper grocery bag containing one brown wool coat with elbows worn shiny as river stones. Tolliver held the coat up by the collar. This yours. It was my father's. Smells like it. He dropped it in the dirt. And Isaiah Rutledge. Standing with his burned hands flat on the hood of a patrol car in the parking lot of a diner, where he had once washed dishes for $2.10 an hour. Looked down at his father's coat lying in the dirt of Merrow County. And he began. Silently. Methodically. Exactly the way he had done in 100 courtrooms. To build the case. Title 18 of the United States Code. Section 242. Whoever, under color of any law, willfully subjects any person to the deprivation of any rights secured by the Constitution. Element 1. Color of law. Uniform. Cruiser. Badge 419. Established. Element 2. Deprivation of a right. Unreasonable search of the person. Unreasonable search of the vehicle. Unlawful seizure. Established. 3 times over. Element 3. Willfulness. He said it into a camera. I don't need a reason. Established. Elle m'en fout. And this was the element that turns a misdemeanor into a felony. That turns a year into 10. Bodily injury. Isaiah Rutledge looked at his own hands. Established. And then he heard the handcuffs. And he heard Mink say, Turn around. and he understood that they were not for him. Devin Rutledge, 19 years old, put his wrists together behind his back voluntarily. He did not resist. He did not tense. His hands were open, fingers spread. Exactly the way his uncle had taught him in a booth 6 minutes earlier. Cody Mink ratcheted the cuffs down 11 clicks. The medical report, and there was one, because a United States Attorney's office in an entirely different district was extremely thorough about this. Documented bilateral abrasions to the wrists, a compressed ulnar nerve on the left side, and numbness in the fourth and fifth fingers of Devin Rutledge's left hand, persisting for 9 weeks. He is right-handed. That is the only reason he still writes. The boy made a sound, and Isaiah Rutledge moved. He took one step, away from the hood, toward his nephew. His hands never came up. They never left his sides. And Wade Tolliver was on him before the second step landed, driving him face down onto the hood of the cruiser. One hand on the back of his neck. One hand twisting an arm up behind the shoulder blade, past where an arm is meant to go. You can hear Ruth Ann Purnell scream his name. You can hear the tourist woman from Ohio saying, "Oh my God. Bill. Oh my God. Bill. Get it. Get it. Get it." And you can hear her husband, 64 years old, a retired insurance adjuster who had voted twice for the sheriff of his own county back home, fumbling his phone out of his shirt pocket. Bill Hargrove's video is the one that went around the world. 41 million views in 6 days. It is 8 seconds long. And in it, Deputy Wade Tolliver, leaning 240 pounds down onto the neck of a man whose burned hands are splayed across the hood of a patrol car, turns his head, looks directly into a window full of people filming him, and winks. He winks. 19 years. And he had never once had a reason to be afraid of a camera. At 9:15, Isaiah Rutledge was handcuffed and placed in the back of Merrill County Sheriff's Department Unit 12. His hands were locked behind him. The steel went across the burns. At 9:15, his phone lay dark on the hood of a cruiser, and the fourth check-in of the morning was missed. At 9:16, 6 miles south, at a gas station on Route 9, Chief Deputy United States Marshal Vivian Okafor set down a cup of coffee she had not tasted and looked at a tablet where a blue dot had been sitting motionless at a diner for 23 minutes and had just gone gray. She keyed her radio. "All units. This is Okafor. Signal-los en principal. Last known location. Route 9 North. The diner. Roll it." A voice came back. "Mom. Protocol says we wait for the 90-minute. Ray." "Yes. Mom. His father died on Tuesday, and he is sitting in a county where 2 Ridgeline associates have family." "Roll it." 6 Chevrolet Suburbans came out of that gas station lot in 11 seconds. And inside the diner, Ruth Ann Purnell knelt down behind her counter and opened the cabinet where she kept the extra coffee filters. And she took out a shoebox. It was a shoebox for a man's size 11. The lid was held on with 2 rubber bands. And those rubber bands had been replaced so many times across so many years that the cardboard underneath them had worn shiny. Inside were index cards, 406 of them, in her handwriting, alphabetized by the last name of the officer under the letter T. There were 61 cards. The oldest was dated March of 1996. It read, in blue ballpoint ink, "Deputy Tolliver, new, young, told the Ferris boy to get up off my porch bench and called him a name. Boy was 14. Boy's mama cried in my bathroom for 20 minutes. I told her to write it down. She wouldn't. So I did. The most recent card was dated 3 weeks earlier." Ruth Ann Purnell put the lid back on the box. She snapped the rubber bands, and she walked out through her own screen door into the white morning light, past the ice machine, into the gravel, 71 years old, in a hairnet and an apron. And she crossed that parking lot and set the shoebox down on the hood of the patrol car, 6 inches from Wade Tolliver's hand. "Wade," she said, "take your hands off that man." Tolliver looked at the box. Then he looked at her. "Ruthie, I'm going to tell you one more time. 31 years. Ruth Ann Purnell said. "In my restaurant, at my tables, I wrote down every one of them. Every child you put your hands on. Every grown man you called boy over my grits. Every time you walked in here and ate and didn't pay. And I let you. Because I have a mortgage." Her chin came up. Her voice did not. 406. 61 of them are you, for the first time in 19 years. Something moved behind Wade Tolliver's eyes that was not comfort, and then he barked out a short life, ugly laugh, and said the sentence that killed Merrow County. "And who are you going to give them to?" "Ruthie Warren Teague. He's my deacon." And that was when the dust came up on Route 9. They came in a column, doing 70 miles an hour in a 45, and they did not slow down for the gravel. 6 black Chevrolet Suburbans, government plates, headlights burning in broad daylight. And the sound they made coming off that asphalt onto the lot was the sound of the 20th century ending. Dust rose off Route 9 in a wall and hung there. They did not park. They deployed. 3 vehicles across the entrance, so that nothing on wheels was leaving. 2, flanking the cruisers. 1 nose-to-nose with Unit 12. Close enough to touch. Doors opened before the trucks had finished rolling. And 12 Deputy United States Marshals came out of them in tactical vests. And the letters across their chests were 4 inches high and legible from the highway. United States Marshal. Cody Mink's hand went to his sidearm. "Deputy." The voice came from the lead vehicle. Not loud. Carrying. "Take your hand off that weapon. Right now. I am not going to ask you twice. And I am the friendliest person in this parking lot." Chief Deputy United States Marshal Vivian Okafor was 5 feet 4 inches tall. She was 58 years old. She had 29 years in the service, and she had run the protective detail for 2 federal judges under active threat. And she walked across that gravel with her credentials held out in front of her, like a woman carrying a lantern into a room whose shape she already knew. Mink's hand came off his gun. Okafor did not look at him. She looked at the man bent over the hood of a patrol car with a deputy's weight on his neck and his burned hands cuffed behind his back. She stopped 6 feet away. "Deputy," she said, "you will release him." Now, Tolliver's grip did not move. His voice came out with the laugh still in it. The reflex of a man who in 19 years had never once received a piece of information capable of hurting him. "Mom, I don't know what you people think this is, but this here is a county matter. Wade Tolliver. Badge 419. Merrow County Sheriff's Department. 19 years of service." Okafor lifted her credential higher. "I am Chief Deputy United States Marshal Vivian Okafor. I have 12 federal officers behind me. And the man you are kneeling on is under the protection of the government of the United States." Silence. Real silence this time. The screen door did not creak. The fryer did not tick. 14 people stood pressed against the window glass of Ruthie's wayside and did not breathe. "He's a what?" Mink said. Okafor turned her head very slightly and looked at the 26-year-old and gave him the only mercy anyone gave anybody in that parking lot. "So," she said, "put your hands where I can see them. And do not say another word until you have a lawyer." Then she turned back to Tolliver. "Take your hand off him." The pressure came off Isaiah Rutledge's neck. He straightened up slowly. Blood on his cheekbone. Blood in his eyebrow. His jacket torn open at the shoulder seam. His father's coat lying in the dirt 4 feet away. And his father's citation dissolving on a tabletop inside. And the backs of both his hands cuffed behind him. Blistered, white and glassy in the sunlight, he stood there, and he breathed. Vivian Okafor stepped in front of him and looked up into his face and permitted herself exactly 1 second of unprofessional emotion. Then she straightened her spine, and she spoke to that parking lot the way a herald reads a proclamation. Ladies and gentlemen, the man in your handcuffs is Isaiah Grant Rutledge. 11 days ago, he was confirmed by the United States Senate as the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Mississippi. She let it sit. He is the chief federal law enforcement officer for this district. He is the chief federal prosecutor for 37 counties. She turned her head and looked directly at Wade Tolliver, including this one. Nobody moved. Inside the diner, the young mother put her hand over her mouth. The 3 poultry workers looked at one another. Olivin Meeks, 78, sat down hard on a stool, and his phone kept recording the ceiling for another 2 minutes. Ruth Ann Purnell put both hands flat on top of a shoebox, and she began to cry. Not the way people cry at funerals, the way people cry when a debt is finally publicly acknowledged. After 31 years of being told it does not exist, Wade Tolliver's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. He looked at the man in front of him, at the torn jacket and the blood and the ruined hands. And you can watch, in real time, on 4 different videos, a 19-year-old belief system fail like a bridge. I didn't. He never said. He never told me who he's. And that is the exact moment when Isaiah Grant Rutledge finally spoke. He did not shout. He never shouted. Every witness agreed on that. And the audio confirms it. He spoke so quietly that the people at the window had to read his lips. And the Bureau's technicians had to run the track 4 separate times to lift it clean. You're right, Isaiah said. I never said. Tolliver stared at him. I never told you my name. I never told you my title. I never told you my office. I sat in a booth and ate eggs. And I asked you one question. What is the crime? And you didn't have an answer at 9:04. And you didn't have one at 9:16. He tilted his head. Blood ran along his jaw. And that is the whole case. Deputy, that is the entire case. Because whatever you tell yourself in the car, whatever you tell your union representative, and your wife, and the man who has been putting your complaints in a drawer for 19 years, understand this. You did not do this to a United States attorney. He stepped closer. Okafor did not stop him. You did this to a black man in a rental car. Isaiah said. You did it because he was a black man in a rental car. You would have done it to any black man in any rental car on this road on any Saturday for 19 years. And you did? And not once. In all that time. Did anyone with a badge or a title or a telephone ever ask you for a reason? He looked past Tolliver. At the shoebox, sitting on the hood in the sun. You just picked the wrong Saturday to keep the receipts. Tolliver's voice cracked. Sir, don't. Sir. If I had known. And Isaiah Rutledge closed his eyes, because there it was. The oldest sentence in America. The sentence his father never got to hear. The sentence that comes out of every one of these men at the exact moment the floor gives way beneath them. If I had known you were somebody, if I had known you had a rank, if I had known you had a title, if I had known there would be consequences. Isaiah opened his eyes. That, he said, is your confession. Not the coffee, not the handcuffs. That, because you have just told 12 federal officers and 14 witnesses that whether a man gets dragged out of a diner by his hair in this county depends entirely on whether you happen to know who he is. His voice never rose. It got colder, and quieter, and more precise. The way a scalpel gets precise. And in about 400 cases, you didn't know, and nobody ever came. He turned away. Chief Deputy. Sir, take these off me. Please. The handcuffs came off. Isaiah rubbed his wrists once, briefly, and then walked past Wade Tolliver, as though the man had become a weather condition, and knelt down in the gravel with his ruined hands, and picked up his father's coat, and shook the dust out of it. Then he went to his nephew. Devin Rutledge was standing between two marshals with his wrists still locked behind him, and he was 19 years old, and his face was wet, and he was trying so hard not to make a sound that his shoulders were shaking. Isaiah lifted both burned hands and held the boy's face. Look at me. Devin looked at him. You did everything right. Isaiah said, Everything. Do you hear me? Everything right. And it did not save you. And that is not your fault. And it is not your failure. And I am going to spend the rest of my career making certain that the next boy does not have to be that perfect just to eat breakfast. Devin broke. Vivian Okafor unlocked the handcuffs herself, and then turned her back so the boy could weep in private, and lifted one hand, and 12 United States Marshals turned their backs too. At 9:31 in the morning, Deputy Wade Tolliver surrendered his sidearm, his badge, and his radio to the Chief Deputy United States Marshal for the Northern District of Mississippi, in a gravel parking lot, in front of 31 witnesses. At 9:44, Sheriff Roy Pardue arrived, 62 years old, 4 terms in office. He got out of his truck straightening his hat, and he took one look at 6 black Suburbans, and he did not say a single word. At 9:02, a special agent in charge from the Bureau's Jackson Field office was on the telephone with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice in Washington. And at 10:19, Isaiah Rutledge, sitting on the tailgate of a Suburban while a paramedic wrapped his hands in wet gauze, made the phone call that decided everything that came afterward. He did not call a reporter. He did not call a lawyer. He did not call his sister. He called the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, and he said this. This is Rutledge, Northern District of Mississippi. Approximately 70 minutes ago, I was the victim of a federal civil rights offense committed inside my own district. I am formally recusing myself and my entire office from any investigation or prosecution arising out of this incident, effective immediately. I request that Maine Justice assign a special attorney from the Civil Rights Division. A pause on the line. Isaiah, are you all right? No, sir, Isaiah said, but that is not why I am calling. He looked across the gravel lot at a 71-year-old woman standing in the sun beside a shoebox. I am calling, he said, because I believe this is a pattern. Now understand what he had just done. Because almost nobody does. Isaiah Rutledge was the most powerful prosecutor in 37 counties. He had 8 assistant United States attorneys and the entire weight of the Department of Justice standing behind him. And the law would not permit him to touch this case with a 10-foot pole because he was the victim. And a victim can never be the state. He knew that before the paramedic finished wrapping his hands, and he gave it up. In writing, 71 minutes after a man dragged him across a floor by his hair, before he washed the blood off his face, before he called his sister, before he let himself sit down, that single decision is the reason Wade Tolliver went to prison, because 19 months later, when Dwayne Hollifield stood in front of a federal jury and told them this whole thing was a powerful man's revenge, that a federal prosecutor had bent the machinery of the United States government to settle a personal score, the government did not have to argue about it. Special Attorney Marguerite Delacroix simply lifted a single sheet of paper off the table and read the timestamp aloud. Recusal Memorandum. 10:19 in the morning, October 11th. Mr. Hollifield, she said, would like you to believe my witness used his power. Ladies and gentlemen, the very first thing Isaiah Rutledge did with his power that morning, sitting on a tailgate with his face split open and his hands burned to the bone, was give it away. The Civil Rights Division sent Marguerite Delacroix down from Washington on a Tuesday. She was 44 years old. From New Orleans by way of Yale. And she had tried 19 deprivation of rights cases and lost 4, which in that line of work is a phenomenal record. Because these are the hardest cases the government of the United States ever brings. Juries do not want to convict police officers. Juries want, desperately, to believe that the man in the uniform had a reason. Her entire strategy was built on making 12 people understand that he did not. The Bureau worked it for 14 months. They pulled dash camera footage. They pulled the fitness tracker. They subpoenaed 19 years of Wade Tolliver's traffic stops and ran the racial demographics against a county that is 38% black. And they found that 81% of his discretionary stops and 94% of his vehicle searches involved black drivers. They found 43 complaints filed against Wade Tolliver across 19 years. Every single one had been closed with the same 3 words. Unfounded. No action. Every single one had been signed by Sheriff Roy Pardue, and 31 of them had been forwarded to the District Attorney of Merrill County, Warren Teague, who declined prosecution in every case, and who telephoned Roy Pardue within 1 hour of each declination, for an average call length of 4 minutes. But the piece of evidence that broke this case open was not federal. It was a shoebox. 2 agents drove out to Ruthie's Wayside on a Thursday afternoon in October and sat down in the corner booth. That booth? And Ruth Ann Purnell brought them coffee and would not let them pay for it. Then she brought out the box. 406 index cards. 31 years. Names. Dates. Times. The officer. The customer. What was said. Who cried. Who left without eating. Who never came back through that door again. 61 of them, said Tolliver. The lead agent, a Bureau veteran with 22 years in, later testified that his hands were unsteady by the 4th card, and that he had to go outside and stand in the parking lot for several minutes. Miss Purnell, he asked her when he came back in, why did you keep these? And Ruth Ann Purnell, 71 years old, in a hairnet, said this, because somebody was going to ask one day. I didn't know who. I didn't know when. I just knew that if nobody wrote it down, then it never happened. She smoothed the lid of the box with both thumbs, so I wrote it down. For 31 years. And you are the first person who has ever come and asked. That box became Government Exhibits 7 through 412. The newspapers called it the Purnell Index. On a Wednesday in March, a federal grand jury sitting in Oxford, Mississippi returned a 9-count indictment against Wade Tolliver, deprivation of rights under color of law resulting in bodily injury. 2 counts. 1 for Isaiah Rutledge and 1 for Devin Rutledge. Conspiracy against rights and falsification of a record in a federal investigation for the incident report he filed at 2:15 that same afternoon, in which he wrote that Isaiah Rutledge had resisted and taken an aggressive posture, and in which he did not mention a cup of coffee. Against Cody Mink, the same 3 counts. Against Sheriff Roy Pardue, conspiracy against rights, obstruction of justice, and destruction of records. Because when federal agents arrived at his office with a warrant, Roy Pardue was standing at a shredder. District Attorney Warren Teague was not indicted. He resigned 11 days later. On the morning, a reporter telephoned him and read the phone log out loud, 1 call at a time, and asked him to explain the 4 minutes. Cody Mink pleaded guilty in July. He was 27 by then. He came into the courtroom in a suit his mother had bought him, and he sat with his hands in his lap. And when the judge asked whether he understood that by pleading guilty he was surrendering his right to a trial, he said, "Yes, ma'am," in a voice with nothing left inside it. And then the government of the United States called him as a witness against Wade Tolliver. His testimony ran 90 minutes. This is the 90 seconds that mattered. Mr. Mink, Delacroix asked him. On the morning of October 11th, when you walked into that diner, did Deputy Tolliver tell you why? No. Ma'am, had there been a call? No. Ma'am, there was no call. Dispatch has no record of one. Because there wasn't one, then why did you go in? Mink was quiet for a long moment. Because he saw the car. He said, what about the car? Out-of-state plate. And he saw who got out of it? Say what you mean. Mr. Mink. Mink looked down at his hands. He said, let's go see what they're doing here. They. Yes. Ma'am. Mr. Mink. In 14 months at the Merrill County Sheriff's Department, how many times did you and Wade Tolliver stop, search, question, or detain a citizen without any legal basis whatsoever? Objection, said Hollifield. Calls for a legal conclusion. Overruled, said the judge. He has pleaded guilty to it. I don't know the number. Mink said. Estimate. Every week. Most weeks. More than once. In 14 months. Did any supervisor ever ask you to justify a single one of those stops? No. Ma'am. Did any supervisor ever review one? No. Ma'am. Did anyone? Delacroix said. Anyone at all. In 14 months. In the entire apparatus of Merrill County, Mississippi, ever ask you for a reason? The courtroom was silent for 11 seconds. It is in the transcript. No. Ma'am. Cody Mink said. Nobody ever asked us for a reason. Why not? And the young man's voice came out so quietly that the judge asked him to repeat it. Because that's not how it works out there. He said, on the 5th day of trial, the government called Ruth Ann Purnell. She was 73 years old by then. Her knees were finished. She walked to that witness stand slowly. In a navy blue dress she had bought at a department store in Tupelo, with a small gold cross at her throat. And it took her 11 seconds to cross a courtroom, and not one person in that room made a sound while she did it. Delacroix let her sit. Let her get her breath. Miss Purnell, she said, how long have you run Ruthie's Wayside? 31 years and 4 months. And in those 31 years and 4 months, did you ever call the police about what you saw in your own restaurant? Ruth Ann Purnell looked at the jury. Mom? She said. It was the police. Delacroix walked to the evidence table and lifted a clear plastic sleeve. Miss Purnell, I am handing you what has been marked Government Exhibit Number 7. Do you recognize it? Yes. What is it? That's the first one. She held it in both hands the way you hold a photograph of a child. That's March 1996. Would you read it? Please. To the jury, and the old woman put on her reading glasses, and her hands shook, and she read her own handwriting out loud in a federal courtroom in Oxford, Mississippi. 28 years after she wrote it, standing at a cash register with a dish towel over her shoulder, Deputy Tolliver, new, young, told the Ferris boy to get up off my porch bench and called him a name. Boy was 14. Boy's mama cried in my bathroom for 20 minutes. I told her to write it down. She wouldn't, so I did. She lowered the card. Miss Purnell, Delacroix said gently. Why wouldn't she? Because she was scared. Ruth Ann Purnell said, because there wasn't anywhere to put it. You write a thing like that down and hand it to Roy Pardue. All you've done is tell him your name. And why did you keep writing them? The old woman was quiet for a moment. Because a thing that nobody writes down, she said, didn't happen. That's how they do it. Not with guns. With paper, they just don't write it down. And then 30 years go by. And everybody says, well, that's just how it was. Nobody complained. She looked directly at Wade Tolliver. In a suite. At the defense table. For the first and only time. So I complained. 406 times. In a shoebox. Under the coffee filters. Dwayne Hollifield stood up to cross-examine her. And he looked at her. And he looked at that jury. And he was a very good lawyer. No questions. Your Honor, he said, and sat down. Isaiah Rutledge took the stand on the 6th day. He wore a gray suit. No flag pin. No credential on his belt. Delacroix had specifically instructed him not to look like the government. And he had understood exactly why. Because he had given that same instruction to 100 witnesses of his own. Hollifield rose with a legal pad he never once looked at. Mr. Rutledge, he said. Forgive me. Is it Mr.? Or do you prefer the title? Mr. is fine. You are an attorney. I am. 26 years. Yes. So when you sat in that booth and began reciting the Fourth Amendment to a deputy sheriff with a high school education, you knew precisely what you were doing. Didn't you? I did. Hollifield paused. You admit that? Of course I admit it. Isaiah said. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was trying to survive a police encounter. You were eating breakfast. Mr. Hollifield. Mr. Hollifield. Isaiah said. I have been black in Mississippi for 51 years. Those are not two different activities. Hollifield moved on. You never identified yourself as a federal officer. No. You never produced a credential. I did not have one on me. You never once said the words, United States Attorney. Not once. So Deputy Tolliver, whatever else he may have done that morning, had no way of knowing who you were. That is correct. And Dwayne Hollifield turned to the jury and repeated it slowly. No way of knowing. Mr. Hollifield. Isaiah said, I'll withdraw the. No. Sir. You have asked it, and I would like to answer it. The judge looked at the defense attorney. You opened the door. Counselor. Sit down. Mr. Rutledge. Answer the question. And Isaiah Rutledge turned in the witness chair and spoke directly to 12 people. 5 of them white. 7 of them black. All of them from within 100 miles of that courthouse. Deputy Tolliver did not know that I was a United States attorney. He did not know I had been confirmed by the Senate 11 days earlier. He thought I was nobody. He thought I was a black man in a rental car with an out-of-state plate. 90 miles from Memphis. Eating eggs. He let it sit. And that is exactly what he was permitted to do to nobody. He raised his hands and turned them over. And the scar tissue across the backs of both of them caught the courtroom light. If the only thing standing between me and this, he said, was a title I never spoke out loud, then nothing was standing between me and this. Something else saved my life that morning. 12 federal officers happened to be parked 6 miles down the road because a woman named Vivian Okafor broke protocol on a hunch. That is not law, he said. That is luck. And 406 people in a shoebox did not get lucky. The transcript records a pause of 11 seconds. Nothing further, said Dwayne Hollifield. The government's final exhibit was not the video. Delacroix saved it. And on the last morning of trial, she walked to the evidence table and lifted a rigid clear sleeve and carried it to the jury box and held it up so the front row could see it. Inside was a piece of paper the color of weak tea, warped, stained dark brown across 4 folds. The ink had bled, but you could still read most of it. State of Mississippi, Merrill County, citation number 4471. Rutledge, Ezra J. The 3rd of November, 1971. Offense impeding traffic, Government Exhibit 14. Delacroix said. The defendant poured a cup of coffee on this. He did not know what it was. Neither did I. Until Mr. Rutledge told me, she turned it in the light. On the 3rd of November, 1971. A millwright named Ezra Rutledge stood in a line outside the Merrill County Courthouse, 9 miles from where you are sitting. In order to register to vote, a Merrill County deputy sheriff wrote him a ticket for standing in an empty road. Ezra Rutledge paid $25, which was 3 days of his wages, and he folded this piece of paper up, and he put it in his coat pocket, and he never spoke of it again to a living soul for 50 years. She lowered it, because there was nowhere to say it to. 51 years later, his son sat down to breakfast 9 miles from that courthouse with this paper in his pocket, and a Merrill County deputy sheriff poured boiling coffee over his hands and dragged him out the door by his hair. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense wants you to believe that this was one bad morning. It was not one bad morning. She set Exhibit 14 down on the rail of the jury box, in front of them, where they would have to look at it. It is 50 years long, and it is in your hands. And this is the first time in the entire history of Merrill County, Mississippi, that anybody has ever had somewhere to say it to. The United States rests. The jury was out for 6 hours and 40 minutes. Wade Tolliver was convicted on every count. He was sentenced on a Friday in November, and before she pronounced, Judge Miriam Kessler Boyd asked him whether he wished to be heard. And Wade Tolliver stood up in a courtroom of the United States and said the same 4 words he had said in a gravel parking lot. Because he still, after 19 months, did not understand what was wrong with them. Your Honor, if I had known. Sit down, Mr. Tolliver, the judge said. She gave him 11 years. So Dimmink, who pleaded, who cooperated, who testified, and who wept openly on the witness stand, received 30 months. Sheriff Roy Pardue was convicted the following spring of conspiracy, obstruction, and destruction of records. He was sentenced to 7 years. He lost the pension he had spent 28 years accruing, and he lost the 5th term he was, at the time of his indictment, actively campaigning for. Warren Teague was disbarred, and Isaiah Rutledge never sued anybody. He was entitled to. A civil rights action would have been the easiest verdict of his career, and any lawyer in that state would have taken it on contingency in a heartbeat. His medical records alone were worth a house. His nephews were worth another. He filed nothing. 3 years later, a reporter finally asked him why. On a courthouse step in Jackson, because a check is a receipt. Isaiah said, "It says paid in full. It closes the account." He put on his sunglasses. I did not want them to close the account, because punishing 3 men is not justice. It is bookkeeping. Isaiah Rutledge knew that before the handcuffs came off, and it is the reason he made that second phone call, the one nobody filmed, the one that never trended, the one that actually changed Merrill County, because on the tailgate of that Suburban, he had not said, "Arrest him." He had said, "I believe this is a pattern." Those 5 words are a term of art. Under Title 34 of the United States Code, the Attorney General of the United States may sue any police department that engages in a pattern or practice of conduct depriving people of their constitutional rights. It is one of the heaviest instruments the federal government owns, and it is almost never used because it requires proof. Years of it, thousands of pages of it, statistics, and complaints, and testimony from people who are usually far too tired and far too frightened to speak. Merrill County had that proof. It had been sitting under a coffee filter cabinet in a shoebox for 31 years. The investigation took 26 months. Federal investigators interviewed 391 residents. They read 406 index cards. And because those cards had names on them, and dates, and times, they knew exactly where to look. And so they found the people. They found the Ferris boy, who had been 14 in 1996 and was 43 now and drove a truck out of Memphis, and who sat in a hotel conference room and wept while a federal investigator read his own mother's grief back to him off a card in a stranger's handwriting. They found a woman who had been strip-searched on the shoulder of Route 9 in 2004 in daylight for a broken taillight that was not broken. They found a man who had spent 14 months in the county jail on charges that were dismissed the week after his job. His apartment and his marriage were gone. The final report ran 211 pages. It concluded that the Merrill County Sheriff's Department had engaged in a long-standing pattern of unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests, overwhelmingly against black residents, sustained by a supervisory structure that, in the report's own words, did not merely fail to detect misconduct, but functioned, by design, to render misconduct invisible. The consent decree was signed on a Tuesday morning in federal court. Body cameras on every deputy, recording continuously, uploading automatically, and no officer may delete a file. A written justification for every single stop, filed within the hour, reviewed within the week, audited quarterly by an independent monitor. A civilian review board with subpoena power, 9 members, 4 of whom must live in the districts that generated the most complaints. A public complaint portal that does not route through the sheriff, does not route through the district attorney, and cannot be closed by either. Full demographic reporting of every stop, search, citation, and use of force, published online, every 90 days, forever. And one more provision, which is not standard, which Marguerite Delacroix wrote into that decree herself, and which the county's lawyers fought for 4 months and lost. Every complaint filed against the Merrill County Sheriff's Department between 1994 and the date of this decree that was closed as unfounded without a documented investigation shall be reopened and independently reviewed. All 406 of them. By name, Wade Tolliver's name is on 61. Roy Pardue's signature is on all 406. Isaiah Rutledge did not sign that decree. He could not. He was recused. He sat in the 3rd row of the gallery in a gray suit like any other citizen and watched a federal judge sign it. And when it was done, a young lawyer from Washington leaned over the bar and shook his hand and said, "Sir, this is the strongest decree we have written in a decade." "It isn't mine," Isaiah said, and he turned around. In the 4th row, in a navy blue dress and a small gold cross, sat Ruth Ann Purnell, 74 years old, holding an empty shoebox in her lap, because the Bureau had never returned the cards, and she had asked them not to. "It's hers," Isaiah said. "We just typed it up." Ruthie's wayside closed that spring, not because of the case, because Ruth Ann Purnell was 74, and her knees were finished, and she had been standing on a concrete floor since the Reagan administration, and because for the first time in her adult life, she wanted to sit down. A nonprofit bought the building. It was funded by a settlement that Isaiah Rutledge refused to accept for himself and directed, in a stipulation his own lawyers called procedurally bizarre and legally airtight, to a corporation that did not yet exist. They gutted it. They kept the counter. They kept the 11 stools, sanded and retopped. They kept the screen door, spring and all, because Devon insisted, and because by then Devon had standing to insist. It opened on a Saturday in October, 4 years to the day, the Ruth Ann Purnell Center for Civil Rights, a free legal clinic. Merrill County, Mississippi, 9 attorneys, 4 paralegals, 6 law students from Ole Miss and Tougaloo on rotation, every semester, funded in perpetuity, walk-in hours Tuesday through Saturday, no appointment, no fee, anybody, and on the wall behind the counter, the same laminate, there are 2 things in frames. The first is the lid of a shoebox, with 2 rubber bands still stretched across it. The second is a piece of paper the color of weak tea, warped, stained dark across 4 50-year-old folds. on which you can still make out the words Rutledge, Ezra J., and impeding traffic, and a fine that came to 3 days of a millwright's wages, and underneath it, on a small brass plate, it says this: he had nowhere to say it to. Now you do. Devin Rutledge did not become a prosecutor. He is a public defender in Hinds County. The fourth and fifth fingers of his left hand still go numb when the weather turns. And he is very, very good at his job. He was asked once, at his law school, why he had chosen the defense side, and he thought about it for a long moment, because my uncle showed up with 12 United States Marshals. He said, and I remember sitting in the back of that patrol car with my hands going dead behind me, thinking, what happens to the boy whose uncle doesn't have 12 marshals? He turned his coffee cup a half turn on the table. That's my client list, he said. Every single one of them. Isaiah Rutledge served 6 years as United States Attorney. He prosecuted 11 public corruption cases and 43 civil rights cases, more than the 4 men who held the office before him combined. He hired the first black chief of the criminal division in the history of that district. He gave no interviews about that morning. Not one. In 6 years, with a single exception, on the day the clinic opened, a 19-year-old woman with a phone and shaking hands, a reporter for a college newspaper, caught him for 90 seconds in the gravel outside. She asked the obvious question. She asked what he would say to Wade Tolliver and Isaiah Rutledge. In a gray suit, standing in the exact parking lot where a man had once knelt on his neck and winked at a window full of witnesses. Thought about it honestly. Nothing. He said, I have nothing to say to Wade Tolliver. He was a symptom. I have never been interested in symptoms. Then what would you say to the county? He looked at the diner, at the screen door, at the window where 14 faces had once been pressed against the glass, that my father was not a coward. He said, for 50 years I believed that he should have fought it, that he should have gone downtown and made noise and made them look at him. I was ashamed of that folded piece of paper. I carried that shame through law school. I carried it through 26 years of practice. And I did not understand it until a man poured coffee on it in front of me. His jaw moved. My father was not folding up his dignity. He said. He was filing it. He was keeping a record for a world that did not yet have anywhere to file it. The same as Ruthie's box. The same as every mother in this county who ever told her child, write it down. Baby, write down exactly what he said to you. They were not giving up. Isaiah said. They were building the case. It just took 50 years for somebody to be in the room who could read it. He glanced at the door of the clinic. So I would tell the county this. The record was always there. You simply spent 100 years calling it unfounded. A badge is not a shield. It is a weight, and a man who cannot carry it, who cannot answer in one plain sentence the simplest question a free citizen can ask him. What is the crime? Should never have been handed it in the first place. Wade Tolliver was right about exactly one thing in his entire life. And he said it into a 19-year-old boy's phone camera at 9:07 in the morning. He did not need a reason. For 19 years, in that county, on that road. That was true. It was true because 43 complaints went into a drawer. It was true because 31 referrals went into a wastebasket. It was true because every person he did it to had no rank, no camera, no lawyer, and nowhere on this earth to say it to. It stopped being true on the morning he picked the wrong table. But hear this, because it is the only part of this story that matters. Isaiah Rutledge was not saved by his title. He never spoke it. Tolliver never knew it. What saved him was 6 miles of highway and a chief deputy marshal who broke protocol on a hunch. What saved him was luck and a 71-year-old woman in a hairnet who could not stop it, could not prosecute it, could not even get a phone call returned about it. but who understood a thing the entire Department of Justice had to be taught, that an injustice nobody writes down did not happen, and an injustice somebody writes down is a case, 406 index cards, 31 years. A shoebox under the coffee filters. That is what one black woman in Mississippi with no power at all did, with the only weapon she was ever given. And it took down a deputy, a sheriff, a district attorney, and a department that had run that county since before her mother was born. So if you are listening to this, and you have been talked down to, put against a car, followed through a store, pulled over for nothing, called boy by a man who has never in his life feared a consequence, write it down, not for a lawsuit, not for a payout, not even, necessarily, for yourself. Write it down, because one day somebody is going to walk into the room who can read it. And when they ask how long this has been going on, the difference between a shrug and a conviction will be whether one single person, somewhere, kept the receipt. Your father folded his and put it in a coat pocket. You do not have to. They thought the badge made them untouchable. It didn't. It just made them findable. Now I want to hear from you. It is 9:07 in the morning. Nobody in that diner knows who he is. You are sitting at table 3. Would you lift your phone and start recording, or would you look down at your plate? Be honest. Nobody is judging you here. Isaiah said he was ashamed of his father for 50 years. Until he realized the old man was not surrendering. He was keeping a record. Is there something your parents, or your grandparents, endured in silence that you only understood much later? Tell us about it. And this one matters most. Who is the Ruth Ann Purnell in your life? The woman who saw everything, said very little, and remembered all of it. Say her name in the comments. Somebody out there needs to read it today. Subscribe to Black Stories. Because the record was always there. We are just finally in the room to read it.